Hi everyone, good afternoon. This is Catherine Christo, our Education Program Manager at AIHA. We'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Bringing Your A-Game Stellar Sessions at AIHCE. This is part of our new speaker prep program to ensure high-quality sessions at conference. We've also created a Catalyst community. This is your opportunity to get tips and tricks for your session and implement them at the end of May. I would like to introduce our Director of Education, Alla Orlova. She's going to introduce today's speaker, Jonathan Klain.
Hello, everyone. Jonathan Klain works for the Ira A. Fulton School of Engineering at Arizona State University. Go Sun Devils! The over 20,000 engineering students know him as that bald-headed safety guy who tells bad jokes, throws us candy for participating in training, and wears the loudest Hawaiian shirt on the planet. Jonathan has a crazy number of initials under his name, has worked as an IH for decades, and has written a ton of technical stuff that no one seems to read. Go figure. He is a recovering college professor and has served as an expert witness. His free time is measured to the left of zero. But when he does have downtime, he likes to write both fiction and creative nonfiction. Jonathan's focus has changed, but that's because he's wearing the wrong pair of glasses. He is now in the PhD program at ASU with a crazy long name, Human and Social Dimensions of Science and Technology, or HSD, where he does quirky research on how narratives affect risk perception and safety culture. He's a research fellow in ASU's Risk Innovation Lab, led by Professor Andrew Maynard, where they create new ways of looking at risk. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Alla. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Erin. How is everyone? I hope you're all good. I hope you enjoyed that hopefully somewhat humorous intro. That's certainly part of today's topic, and I hope you will absolutely honor me by telling me afterwards, maybe after the conference, some of the things that you may have incorporated into your session that you absolutely stole from me, and you will make me very happy. So let's go. All right. It's 100,000 years ago. You're on the savannah. You're walking with your companion. You're returning from foraging for some food for your clan. It's preternaturally quiet, unnatural. All of a sudden, you detect movement behind you. The hair on the back of your neck and back stands up on end as it does for most hominids. It's megafauna. It's a saber-toothed tiger. You take off running. Your heart is beating fast. You're sweating profusely. You're running as fast as you can, you and your companion. You're a little bit ahead of your companion. All of a sudden, you hear the megafauna pounce and the rending of flesh and bone, the biting, the scream cut off unnaturally. You keep running and running. You're thankful that you survived. You finally get back to the cave with the rest of your hominid clan. You're panting. You're out of breath. They gather around. They want to know what happened. You go over to the wall and you pick up some charcoal that's left there that you all use to communicate. You start to draw on the wall. You make a line. You make another line. You start to make some dots. You do some other things up there. You step back and you take a look and you think, this is perfect. I can tell them exactly what happened. You've drawn a chart with the data points, and you talk about how you've been trending upwards lately in the deaths of the fellow hominids in your clan. You make your salient points from the data, how it goes up, it goes down, it's gone back up again, you're losing people, this is really causing some critical problems for your little group, and then you, at the bottom, of course, have many wonderful bullet points that you highlight along the way. You turn to face them, and they are all staring at you with blank stares. It's like crickets. What's the story, right? What they really want and what they really expect and what really saved our lives is stories. Clearly, stories resonate with us. Okay? We can relate to them. They have an emotional connection. We remember stories very, very well. Towards the end, I'm going to talk about what stories can do and what the various components of stories are, so that you can know what you need to put into your story. It is very, very basic. So hopefully a rather interesting start that you perhaps were not expecting. But clearly what we are trying to do in this session is point out that there are these other ways besides lecturing that will easily hold people's interest, keep them in the room, and allow them to really remember what you've had to say. All right, so I have a question for you now because I want to truly engage you. So in the chat box, please, why don't you just put in what would you like to learn today in the next approximately 54 minutes, okay? I'll give you half a minute to do so. So just go ahead. Anyone, anything. What is it, the one thing that really brought you to this? There's a bunch of you there. Would like to see it. Great. How to keep them engaged, Carl says. Marcella, how to make a story interesting. Marshall wants to know how to use PowerPoint slides. These are great. Rex, how do I hook them? Okay. Elizabeth, how to engage your folks. Brent, I want to wow someone. These are great, great, great requests. What's the end of the story, right? Yeah, okay. What is the end of the story? That's a good one, Brandy. Molly, how to be convincing. Courtney, can we use animation in the presentation mode at AIHCE? I'll leave that one to Ala, Catherine, and Erin. Carl, how to engage participants. Bill, keep it interesting. Stephen or Stefan, I think it's Stefan with the A, sorry about that. How I can see what others in the class want to have in their presentations. Jean, pose interesting questions that further everyone's thinking. Corey, how to reach adults. Ed, how to get the audience to interact. Great. Great. And so you can see, and I do this in the train the trainers that I do for AIHA and for others. People love to participate. You've already been able to. I've engaged you. Look at how many of you immediately, when I gave you the offer of saying, what do you want to learn today, you immediately reacted. I made it possible. I facilitated it. Facilitator is a much better title than trainer or teacher. So look at this slide I have up and what we just got done versus the next slide. Okay, and this is a poll, right? So it's really the same question. What do you want to learn today? But now look at what I've done. Okay, not necessarily better and not necessarily worse, but it is different. It's somewhat limiting, right? So I do want you to engage in the poll right now. Okay, again, half a minute, tops. Go ahead and click. No right answers, as we like to say. Click on anything. I see responses coming in. Okay, as soon as I can see that it slows down enough, it looks pretty good. Yeah, it's not going to be quite a bell curve, but there's definitely something right in the center there, which is really neat. And it looks like we're done. It looks like everyone has voted. From what I can see, it slowed down, so I get to skip to results. And there you go. So not a bell curve by any stretch of the imagination, not even close, but only because I put engaging them right in the dead center. And that's really the biggest thing that people want, is how to engage your participants. I like to think and call them participants or learners. If we say audience, that's really more one way. Trainees, students, there's all sorts of different things. And keep in mind, this has sort of been created for multiple purposes, as Catherine and Ala were getting at. One is, of course, your sessions at AIHCE. So a tech session that you're leading, you're up at the podium, you're doing your thing, right? It lasts about an hour, right? But then if any are also doing a PDC, right? A course, a 4-hour, 8-hour, 16-hour course for AIHC. And obviously this is easily translatable outward beyond AIHCE and AIHA, but it is AIHA who is putting this on for its members. A really nice thing for them to be doing. So again, those are two different methods. You need to set them up appropriately. We're still getting some results, which is really cool. I love this technology. I love all the colors. I can really see it really well. Bar charts work really nicely, so notice that. Notice how it has the words there. Hopefully you can see it because it's on your computer right there. If there's a group of you looking, that's a little different. Think in terms, if you're presenting it, small words like that on a screen are not going to be easy to show. But the different colors and the numbers at the end, this is really a nice way to display. Not the only way, but a nice way. And let's keep going. So there's some other, and now I didn't really give you an opportunity on this poll to say what the other was, but notice on the chat, when I gave you that opportunity and I made it, hopefully fun and engaging for you and something for you to do, you did it. And then as I, said people's first names, we all love our names being used. And so that's another way to engage your learners, your participants. Continuing. So lots of questions and chances to engage. Notice I had that in there, but it's wonderful validation and confirmation that that's really the primary thing you all are looking for, plus tips, tricks, etc. on speaking. I'm going to mention a bunch of resources that I and AIHA will provide. AIHA has some wonderful resources that they have posted on the speaker page that I've checked out, and others, in particular the TED Talk stuff is really wonderful. I'm adding some things to that, making offers of those sorts of things, including like a really long list of tips and tricks, and some other things that I'll mention along the way. So keep track of them and think about them, and they should be on the AIHA website or available directly from me. So a little bit of a contest gamification, if you will. There are points for whenever you do engage, whenever you answer questions. I don't really care whether you get it right. I just want you to answer the question. So I will never tell someone that they're wrong or no. I will always say, great question. That's really interesting. Oh, I like that. Thank you very much. Those sorts of things, because I want engagement. I don't want people to wait and only say something if they're 100% sure. We need to make sure that we give people every opportunity to interact. As a therapist I happen to know said to me, hey John, the biggest concern for most people is losing face in front of their peers, okay? And so no one really likes to look dumb as they might feel themselves if they ask a question or make a statement and then it is turned into a negative in front of their peers, especially in front of a very large group like we have it in the tech sessions. So you keep track of your own points. All right. So this is another chat one. So I've totally made this open-ended. Well, I want to see if anyone knows who Malcolm Knowles was, and it was. Sadly, Malcolm passed away several years ago. But maybe you can figure it out. Maybe we will see. You can take guesses. Points just for guessing, not even for getting it right. You can give yourself extra points for getting it right if you would like. I'll take anyone's guess here. And so look at the difference now between the previous one where it was really, hey, what do you want to learn, versus this one where I'm asking you some very refined question. People don't want to. It took a while, but I've got some because I made it really, hopefully, well open. I got Elizabeth said educator, Corey said Malcolm X, Ken said researcher, Brett said Scott Knowles' father. Hey, I know Scott. Kate gave me a question mark. Brent, theory of andragogy. Oh, hey. Rex, Mrs. Knowles' son. Carl, he was a public speaker. Carl looks like he may have copy and pasted something from Wikipedia or whatever. He is giving it the citation. Thanks, Carl. That's wonderful. Brent, andragogy. Stefan, no idea. Right. So let's go. And again, here's the poll. So you can enter this. That's fine. Go ahead and click on it. I think you've caught from the chat as well as what I've said what the correct answer is, but feel free to do whatever. A couple of people have reflected a little differently from what I think may have been a little obvious or whatever. So here you go. Skip to the poll. Skip to the little. Oh yeah, and a few people like to have put in that he was CIH number 1. So Malcolm Knowles. So now, so let's just talk about this really briefly. So I could have said to you, hey, Malcolm Knowles was the father of adult education or the father of adult learning, and that's actually called andragogy, something that we don't normally hear. We hear the word pedagogy quite a bit, but we don't hear andragogy. And pedagogy is more kids, although it's used all the way up through college. a little bit of a slippery slope there on the definition of it, which is fine. Andragogy is really about teaching fellow adults, right? So he was the father of adult learning. But I could have told you that, and it probably would not have been really memorable. I have a story I can tell, but in the interest of time, I wanted to do this differently because I already told a story that I made up, and now I'm going to tell you some more true stories along the way. But I created the opportunity to engage you in how to learn this. It does take more time, but the trade-off between efficiencies and effectiveness is 100% the real case here. And I will always side on the side of effectiveness. When it comes to safety and health and industrial hygiene, we need to be effective. When it comes to training and adult learning, we need to be effective. Efficiencies are sadly not of value, and in these contexts, in other contexts they might be, but in these contexts they're not, and that's I think why we're all here today, is to deal with things that have been too efficient and rather ineffective. All right, so and then also if you're doing it on the slide, here is how I show it so that you saw that only highlighting what the correct answer is. Some people will highlight it and fade the others, will gray them out. I will take them totally out so that they're not even on the screen to distract you. You want 0 distractions from what your key point is. Notice I don't even really have anything but this sort of charcoal papyrus. I don't know what the heck it is. It's a very, very simplistic background that hopefully is not very distracting. Right? So nothing else on the slide that's going to take away from the slides. More on that and more on the PowerPoint and all of that as we go. Speaking of PowerPoint talks, right. All right, so what's the #1 complaint of PowerPoint talks? I want to see what you come up with because I get a feeling these are going to be great, right? What's the horror? What are the things you really hate about PowerPoint? So, Marcella, too much words. Oh my God, look at how fast this is going and I can't keep up. Ken, reading the slides, speaker reads, too much text, too many bullets, too much text, overloaded, boring, death by PowerPoint, people read the slides, too much material, too little fonts, reading, clip art, too many words, just bullets, no visual, too many words, too much text, too much slides, too much on slides, too many words and stuff, too much stuff on one slide, too much dependence on the slides, too wordy, speaker reads them, machine gun documentation. I like that, Brett. Read the slides, smaller, blurry photos or graphs. Carl, a crutch. Oh, that was great. And Brandy, animations. Yes, animations are a huge distraction. Don't use them. All right, so here we go. So let me demonstrate. Adult learning principles. Adult learners are self-directed and find their own learning. Adult learners are engaged with the session, presenter, and training. Adult learners are participants in their training. Adult learners prefer to set the agenda and decide on the topics, time, discussions. Adult learners want to use their expertise in their training, etc. Right, so I was trying to be as horribly boring and monotone as I possibly could to really demonstrate it, right? But we knew it, and I loved all of the things that you put in there. Oh, and Kate also put graphics that you can't read. Yes, very true. So if you do need to use the slides to augment the story you're telling, keep in mind TED Talks that are really very effective at telling stories. They use a little bit of visuals, and they use very, very little text, right? But if you do need to, for whatever the reason is, here's another way of doing this. So I got a question for you. What are some adult learning principles? What are the things that adults really like as it pertains to the research and what we've all seen, okay? And so let's go through just a few of them. There's a bunch, but we'll go through a few of them that are pretty key here. So we as adult learners, right, really like to be self-directed. So think in terms of maybe yourself when you learned a musical instrument, or maybe a language, or some other DIY thing, right? Maybe you went on YouTube and you DIY'd how to put together a certain or repair a certain thing. You had to repair a hinge on a door or something like that. So many out there. You're very self-directed. You decided you had a need. There was a problem statement. You went, you found what you needed. You learned it yourself. Adult learners are always very self-directed. We like to be engaged. Big surprise. We want to be involved, right? We love stories. Stories resonate. Already talked about that. Do some more demos as we go. The chat works really well for engagement. As you've seen, you've all done wonderfully with that. Polls are a different way. Again, not necessarily better, not necessarily worse. It's different. Let's use things that work well. Let's use them for the purpose that they're designed for, right? And that sort of thing. But we really like to be engaged. Q&A, right? I can always ask. I can make things into a question. Why would I do that, right? Well, by asking a question, I'm going to get hopefully you thinking about it, and then maybe if I really make it clear that I want you to participate, like I have in the chat, you can say things. I have been to sessions where I've been in the audience, if you will, and someone has said, we'd really like to start by getting people to ask us questions or whatever. And oftentimes there is just, quiet, crickets, right? No one. And so I've actually gone up to the mic and said, okay, I will break the ice, right? Because I, as a fellow trainer facilitator, know how important it is for the first person to go up and do that, or to suggest something, or to offer an answer to a question, because they're trying to engage us. They're trying to do that. So I want to hold up my end, because if I were up there on the podium, I would want someone to do the same for me. So engaging is a wonderful way of doing it. We like to participate. We want to be part of this. This is super important to us, right? We want to be doing something so that we're not distracted by all the other things going around. So chats, polls, voting. You can raise your hand in these sorts of things. Those are all good ways. And context matters. What we're doing now, webinar, obviously different context from AIHCE, which is a tech session, which is different from, say, a half or full day long PDC, or back at your own workplace, right? So a lot of these are translatable, and you're going to have to figure out what's going to be the best for that situation. Okay, but we love to participate. The more you build into it, the more opportunities you give people, the better off you are, right? The more participative they are, the more engaged they are, the better the training will go. So we like to set the agenda. We want to be part of the decision making of what we talk about, right? I want to be able to say, hey, teach me what I want to learn. So the problem, the challenge, if you will, with that is that typical compliance training often starts you at about 180 degrees, opposite to that, right? Adult learners want to be self-directed. We want to set the agenda, etc. So if we limit ourselves only to what, say, the regulator, let's take OSHA for example, says must be included, then we cut out a lot of that. But if we use that only as a bare bones starting point, and we really put a lot of the steering into their hands, we can make this happen. I'm going to tell you a really brief story on that. So I used to do a lot of asbestos training, as I'm sure a lot of you have. So right there I'm trying to relate to you, right? And I used to do it for the same group repeatedly, refresher training. I get that question quite a bit in the Train the Trainers. And after doing it a while, I'm sure you can relate to this, you get a really strong feel, right? I mean, we know our stuff. We're subject matter experts. We really have a good feel for it. So I have done full 2-hour sessions on asbestos for the same group over and over again in my past, where I literally started by saying, who's got a question? Any question whatsoever, ask me anything, right? And as they ask questions, I then say, oh, that's a great question. Let me talk about that. Before I talk about that, though, I've just got to introduce this subject. So if they say, hey, John, how dangerous is it to dry burnish floor tiles? I'm like, oh, wow, that's a really fantastic question. But there's a lot there that I've got to nail down. So what I'm doing is turning it over to them to say, here's what I want to learn. And then it comes back to me to contextualize it, fill in background stuff, and make sure I answer their question. And then we continue and continue, and I can keep track of what I've covered and ensure that I'm covering all of the things I want to. So the perception, which is the reality for the participants, is they actually directed the training. Yeah, we had to talk about asbestos, but they got to say, here's what we want to talk about, and then I end up steering our cruise ship that we're all on, hopefully no norovirus, right? As we go, through this, wow, my God, my metaphor is going all over the place, this sea of asbestos, and all over the place and say, well, here's a nice place to stop. Let's talk about friability. And over here, let's talk about the difference with floor tiles. And let's talk about, and just all these different things that I really wanted to talk about. So there are ways of allowing the participants to really feel that they're contributing to setting the agenda. They like to use their expertise, right? So they want to contribute, they want to participate, they want to even help, in effect, teach. So I have a question for you. I'm going to ask it before I advance to the next slide. What is the best way to learn? Go ahead and put it in the chat box. What is, number one, the best way for anyone to learn something? Go ahead. Do it yourself. Doing, hands-on, teach someone else. Doing, see and hear, do it, teach it. By doing, share experiences, teach someone else. Doing it, teach the material, train someone, blend of methods, doing it, teach it, doing, teaching, depending on what type of learner you are. Oh, I like that. All of those were great. Yes, good. Active participation. All of these are fantastic answers. Absolutely. All right, so here's a nice quote. I love quotes. And quotes we should read. Tell me and I will forget. Show me and I may remember. Involve me and I will understand. Confucius in approximately 450 BCE, right? So involve me, engage me, right? Make me a full participant in it. And doing, yes. Teaching really is a wonderful way to learn, right? Because there's so many things. So what are just a couple of the reasons that teaching, co-teaching, is such a great way to learn something? Go ahead and throw those in the chat box real quick. What does teaching allow you to do? Because a lot of you said that. So going back to you, I know I'm making you do some work here. Learn from others. Good. Thank you. Share experiences. You have to learn it to teach it, understand basics. It reinforces it. You get to say it in your own words. It causes you to figure out context for things. You become familiar. You learn from others. It reinforces. Great. Absolutely. So there, what I'm doing, a couple others, you learn it, you do it, it reaffirms what you know, what you don't know. Sure. So I could have told you all of that, right? No material enough to explain to others. Internalize it. That's great. Yeah, these are really great. So I could have listed all of those as bullet points, right? And that would have been horrible. And worse would have been if I had read it, especially in a monotone. Instead, I engaged you. I said, and this is how I contextualize this for me. In my family, my dad had a quick saying, which was family hold back, or FHB. So if we had guests, then guests ate first. Family hold back, don't ask for seconds till a guest gets to eat again. And I got a great story for that, but I'm going to skip it for the time being, right? Another time. If you see me at the conference, ask me. I'll tell you the story. Yeah, there's a little teaser, right? So I changed FHB, family hold back, into THB, trainer hold back. So I don't speak first, especially in the classroom. I ask questions. You tell me. That engages with them, gets them to contribute. They're actively participating. And then if there's any that they left off of the list that I also have, I can then add those afterwards. Okay, so that was great. I actually don't have any to add to that wonderful list that you all came up with. So let's keep going. So here's a great book, and it's become a bit of a saying in a very good way in training circles. ATD, the Association for Training and Development. It used to be ASTD, but they shortened it for some reason. I believe sells this book. I don't believe we do. I don't believe AHA does. So, but it is a good one. And we do have others as well. But telling ain't training. And I want to give credit, of course, right? So it's a book by Erica Keeps and Harold Stolovich, and it gets at everything that we're doing right now. Lectures don't work. Telling someone something is not training. All you're doing is communicating info in a very one-directional way, and it's not very effective if you want retention. If all you want for success is that I told you something, if you don't care whether I remember it, if you don't care whether I internalize it, whether it helps me change my behaviors, whether I use it, implement it or anything, great, tell me information. In one ear, out the other. I'm a lousy auditory learner. But a story, a story I will remember. And if you actively engage me, I will absolutely remember and be engaged. Let's keep going here. All right, so what are the first three components that we really need to do? So the first is really this training needs assessment. And I like to say, I work in the Fulton Schools of Engineering. So in engineering, we always talk about, and we do this in other cases as well, of course, is what's the problem statement, right? So that's what we're trying to figure out in a training needs assessment. So in this case, the problem statement was that at the conference, the evaluations have shown that people would prefer to have more active engagement, more participation, more interesting speakers, better way of speaking, all of these things, more interactive. And so AIHA staff, whom you've heard from, Ala, Catherine, and Erin, will look at that and say, okay, here's the problem statement. What can we do? They go to the continuing ed committee. They end up then coming to me. We then talk it over, work out a scope here. I engage in a needs assessment technique called reflect on practice, having done this quite a bit, having been a speaker, having been an attendant. Again, best way to learn is to teach, having taught this. Right, so you can see how we're still doing all of this background stuff, trying to figure out how do we solve this problem, right? And then finally, when we say, okay, now we understand what the needs assessment is, so then we craft learning objectives. And the one thing, or several, on learning objectives that I really want to make sure that you retain are what not to do, right? Because in safety and health, we often talk about it's more important to know what not to do than what to do, right? So when you write a learning objective, what usually is the first word under each of those? They are usually bullets. So at the end of the session, the participant will be able to, and then what grammatical type of word is the first? Oh, Marcella's answering the what should we not say, I think. Understand, yeah. But what type of words? Verbs, Courtney, very good. But what type of verb? So Courtney started us off here with verbs. Marcella was answering my first question. I sort of skipped over that. Action, yes. So between Stacy and Courtney, yes, we've covered, there we go. And Stefan put it together, action verbs, right? So you should be able to list, describe, explain, state, did I say discuss? Those sorts of things. Look up Kirkpatrick's levels of evaluation for this, and there's wonderful diagrams for it available online. Hit images, you will find it, and that will give you a good feel for it. And now going back to where I started with, which Marcella was addressing. So what are some of the words that we want to make sure do not show up? They're not action verbs, and in particular, learning objectives have to be three things. And I'm going to give you an acronym to remember, MOD. MOD, mod. Like if you're old enough to remember the 70s like I am, there was the Mod Squad, right? So for those of you younger, you probably don't know, but you could look it up online. But MOD. In this case, MOD, do you know what MOD stand for? M-O-N-D, for learning objectives. Learning objectives need to be, each of those starts off a word, and go for any of them that you'd like. You don't have to do all three. Meaningful, I like that. Not the one I'm looking for, but I do like that. They should be meaningful. Yeah, Liz, that's very good. Great start. What else? M-O-N-D. Any others? Are you getting tired? No, here we go. Direct, measurable. There we go. Ken, measurable, memorable, direct, observable. Yes, good. So measurable, observable, and then I've got to be able to, hey, there we go. Ken got it again. Demonstrable, right, exactly. Measurable, observable, demonstrable. That's what learning objectives need to be. That's why they need to be action verbs. Do not use words like understand, aware, appreciate, or know. They're not measurable, observable, and demonstrable. All right, and then this last part is the instructional design. How do I put it all together? There's a variety of approaches and methods. Again, I have a resource on that I will contribute to AIHA, and I'm going to tell you a really quick story on this, okay? So we're back to stories. You will remember this, and maybe you can identify. So here's the beginning of the story. I don't need to put the whole story up there. I just need the very beginning. I attended a session at this other, not AIHA, conference. and it was on non-lecture methods. And I thought, this is going to be wonderful. Great. We're going to, hear about, learn about, engage in all sorts of non-lecture methods. And I went in, and the place was packed, and I sat down next to my buddy Don, and I looked at him, he looked at me, he said, hey, what do you think, John? I said, I think it's going to be great. What do you think? He said, yeah, it should be really great. And so then we listened, and the speaker was introduced, and he had a master's in education and did a bunch of high-level stuff, and he started talking and kept talking, and he was reading and reading and talking and reading, and literally that's all he did for the entire session. He basically lectured on non-lecture methods. And so we left, and Don turned to me and said, what was that? And I said, I'm pretty sure it was irony. But through pain comes inspiration. And so then out of that, I developed my own, which is anything but lecture, in which I engage the audience in a whole bunch of non-lecture approaches and methods. The audience gets to choose which ones. By order doesn't matter. I just want engagement. So I again, we're back to self-directed adult learners who want to participate in setting the agenda. I put it in their hands, right? And one type of method which we want to talk about is games. And I was struggling to really come up with a quick game to do. And so I'm going to apologize and say I'm so sorry. Well, we're sort of doing a game because I gave you at the very beginning the opportunity to engage in this competition and see how many points, but left it totally up to you to figure that out. But there are so many different games. So here's my question to you. What is the most common game that you have seen used in training? I think we're going to get it pretty quick and repeated. So, bingo. Kate said bingo. See, I wasn't expecting that. There we go. Jeopardy, multiple choice, Jeopardy, yeah. Jeopardy, I think. Quiz, very good. Yeah, all sorts of different ones there. These are really great. Jumping jacks if they nod off. Wow, that's awesome. I love that, Marcella. Quiz, Jeopardy. Yeah, I think Jeopardy is the one I was really thinking of. Again, see how I said the one I was thinking of, I did not say the correct answer. So my language really counts for how then you feel about your, I'm going to call them alternative answers because they're great. Battleship. Battleship would be really cool. And clickers, yes. Love clickers. So no limits. Do a game. Have fun. Now I will say no limits. I have done a game. I actually did the Hollywood Squares. At a conference in a huge hall where people were sitting theater style, and I basically take some crepe paper, that holiday type paper that they make streamers from, crepe paper, and I buy a couple of rolls, and I have the audience help me roll it out. And basically Hollywood Squares, if you don't know, it's a huge tic-tac-toe board. And so then once I've got the tic-tac-toe board set up in the audience, I tell them that everyone within each square is part of the decision-making group. And then I ask for 2 volunteers to come up, a man and a woman, because that's the way the game show is. And so there's an X and a circle, right? And I give them an X and a circle on a piece of paper. And the nice thing, even though they're brought up to the front, is if you remember the show Hollywood Squares, they don't actually answer the question, right? The people in the Hollywood Squares answer it, and they can bluff, too, making it easier on them. The 2 competitors actually just have to do what? They just have to either agree or disagree with what the square says. So by having multiple people in each square, I'm involving everyone. By having it be everyone together, I'm taking out the, hey, I don't want to look dumb in front of my peers sort of thing. It's not just one person. And by further reminding them that they can bluff, right, and make something up, gives them the opportunity to just have fun and not necessarily come up with exactly the correct scientific answer or whatever. Okay? So all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to talk about this non-scientific survey, I will claim it to be. I've done it a couple of dozen times, but it's not random at all. So every time I do a train the trainer, I typically do a nominal group process to try to figure out what are the top 3 traits that people like us, industrial hygienists or other EHS folk, desire in their trainers. And so what is the number 1 trait that they always desire in their trainers. In every single session I've done at AIHA and others, what's the trait they really desire in their trainers? Technical, know more than me, funny, but with a question mark, excited, knowledgeable, entertaining, passion. This is really interesting. Passionate, energetic, humor, personal, energy, entertainer, exciting. Cool. All right. Excellent. So personality. Oh, I like that. Oh, make it personal, but personality. I like how you wrote that, Carl. Charismatic. Yeah. And so notice how I drew out Carl's, right? He did something special. So by doing it special that way, it's good to acknowledge it. Well, oh, that was really cute and cool. Look what he did, right? So those are important things to do. All right. So here is what I have never had a group not come up with this as their number one through nominal group process, a really great training needs assessment and other technique. You ready? All right, here we go. Subject matter expert. Right, 3 words. And so now let's talk about this, right? And so we've got huge differences between the wonderful contributions that you all made that I fully agree with, and hang on a second because I'm going to come back to those in a minute in the next slide or two, okay? But why do IHs and other safety-related folk really value, clearly they value subject matter expertise, right? Well, we value in others what we value in ourselves. What has gotten us where we are? What gets us, the jobs? What gets us the authority? What gets us those initials after our name? All of these things. Why are we in demand? Why do we, it's that we're experts in this hyper-technical information, which is great, but by hyper-valuing it, we end up deciding that that's the most important thing. And I can tell you that andragogy and Malcolm Knowles and all of that is all about putting the learner first, and so having a learner-centric environment and not an information-centric environment. And it's that disparity that is part of our problem statement. Look at the things you all asked for, that you answered. You really are asking for them, to be honest with you. That you said are the most important things to you, right? To you. So you'll find this one really easy. In other groups that I've done that are not like us, they're not IHs, they're not EHS pros. Number 1 trait, valued and desired. I'm going to skip right to it because you already really did answer it. It's everything you put. It's engaging. It's relatable. It's humorous, right? I remember this from my past. I wish I knew who said it, so I'm just going to chalk it up to anonymous. A good trainer is 1/3 teacher, 1/3 entertainer, and 1/3 coach or friend. I think that's a wonderful way of really contextualizing it. And again, I really prefer the non-US title for trainer, which is really facilitator. So from the French, facile, to make easy, right? And so we need to, what our role as trainers and also presenters is to make it easy on the learner so that they can be engaged in the learning process and learn what they want to. All right. I love quotes. So Darcy Gentleman, that is his name. He works for the American Chemical Society, Office of Public Affairs, Manager of Engagement and Science Communications. And he said this to me and a bunch of others in a workshop that we had here at ASU. Let's all get over the fact that we are the biggest fan of our own idea, research, talk, etc., right? And he said it in a good way. He said, and look, we should be, right? If we're not the biggest fan of our own stuff, what does that say about the idea that we're not a huge fan of it? But just because I'm a big fan of it does not mean, and I'll put it into Darcy's context because he's advising people who go before Congress on how to talk science to Congress, okay, that just because I'm a huge fan of the social science research I do, right, quirky research as Ala mentioned in my bio, right, and I do quirky research, doesn't mean anyone else is going to be a fan of it, right? Okay, so we need to design our slides properly. We need to tell our story properly. This is not proper, right? Oh my God. So this is from a study I did with a colleague here on the need for interpersonal communication skills in EHS. And this is the huge, huge table of every single EHS, IH, public health related degree program that we could find. Okay? How many of you have ever been to a talk and you see something like this on the screen and the presenter says, and I know you know these words, right? You ready? I know you can't read this, but, right? So, so this is not an effective way. If there's an important part of this data, I need to tell you the story about it, and I need to show it in a really small way, right? All right, so let's keep going. Another quote, and so another talk here at ASU. There's a lot of talks in academia. It's really a great benefit. The advice these days is no data without narrative, no narrative without data. Great question. So Michael Quinn Patton, you can find him online on Wikipedia, an amazing guy. He was our keynote at a sustainability workshop and talk, and founder and director of Utilization Focused Evaluation, which is basically all about how to write things so that people will actually read them and get engaged in them. And I had the honor, privilege of asking the last question, and I have a passion for narrative. And I said, hey, what about narrative? Where does this fit into everything you've been talking about? And that was his answer. He liked the question. That made me feel great, and don't know if he really did. I think he did. He was smiling, and he seemed sincere, but that's what he said. And I loved his answer. No data without narrative, no narrative without data. Okay? So tell me in the chat box what you think this icon means right now. And I have a reason for doing this without giving you anything else. Warning, danger, danger, Will Robinson return to ship. That would be funny. Hazard alert, caution, concise, danger, warning, damn it. I love it. I'm confused, interest ahead, watch out, attention, all great answers. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, you know, they're all circling around the right thing. But it really seems not very contextual. It seems a little vague. The interesting thing, no one used the GHS. So, and of course, if that was the context of it, right, the GHS symbol, this is one of the GHS symbols. It's not a diamond. Very good. Yes, thank you, Courtney. Correct. It's a triangle, not a diamond. So all of us as EHS professionals pick up on that. So that's really great. I really am glad, Courtney, that you said that. My curiosity would be your average participants, would they really pick up on the boundary shape, right, or not? So, but my training point is use pictures only if they help. They've really got to help. And so another one to briefly show you here. So this is really cute, right? How many of you have seen this? I saw this the other day, twice in the same day, once when I was proofing my slides and once when another person was using it. Okay, but what does it say, right? So I look at it and I go, wait, and I've had workers say this. So it seems like you're saying that as long as I've got my PPE on, I can place my body in the line of fire. Is that really what we're saying there, right? And so you've really got to be careful about these cute, funny, random, whatever photos and make sure that you don't have unintended messages. A good way to test that is not to look at it yourself, but to show it to a bunch of other people that are similar to the group and say, well, tell me what you think about this, right? And make sure that it's helping and not hurting. And so this, to me, is a nice way of sort of showing and contextualizing really what happens. You can see numbers and jargon and info and data and risk and technical sort of all there, colors and jumbled up and just really covering. And then there's me somewhere buried in the middle of that. I could have hidden it, but I did leave it. And so I'm this little itty bitty thing. And we might say, well, the numbers and the data are more important. Well, I think a lot of people would disagree with that. It doesn't tell the story really well. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. Here's another one that I think actually contextualizes a lot of what we do. So I've got this jumble of information in my head that then I am transmitting to someone else, and I'm now filling their head with a whole bunch of random information. Is it really memorable? Probably not. Again, it's sort of a way of looking at what we're doing and really thinking in terms of, is this really memorable? Can they retain this? Does it do what I want it to do? So a colleague asked me this question the other day relative to presenting. He said, it's like this, John. Do you remember Gladys Knight and the Pips? And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, the 70s, right? Midnight Train to Georgia, right? All those wonderful tunes that they did. Sure, what about them? I said, all right, so there's Gladys Knight and there's the Pips, okay? And now, John, there's you and there's your slides, okay? And one of you is Gladys Knight and one of you is the Pips. And I'm pretty sure you don't want to be the Pips. So keep that in mind. And and of course, being from the 70s and the 60s and all, growing up then as a kid, loved that music, still listen to Casey Kasem reruns online these days. I just thought that was a great way. It really resonated with me. If you're not familiar with Gladys Knight and the Pips, you can certainly go on YouTube and listen to some cool songs. But think in terms, imagine that you could craft a story, right, that your participants really are going to engage in. And so I love these pictures, writing out a story, as we all might, and then having someone, just like we all used to do as kids. We used to just love to just, lay out in the grass or wherever, in bed or whatever the case, and really bury ourselves in stories. That's how much stories really resonate with us. Okay, now sometimes we need to convey data. So, did you know that in the U.S., 94% of people know how to ride a bike? That's all I'm telling you with this slide. 94% of people in the U.S. know how to ride a bike. Okay? So that's one way of presenting this. Okay? There's the image of the bikes. Okay? It's a nice image, and the data. That's it. Bang. Versus this, the more typical way, bicycling in the U.S. prevalence. There was a study by YouGov back in 2013. It was United States wide. They looked at all the states. They asked a bunch of questions. And what they found, amongst other things, is 94% of people in the U.S. know how to ride a bike. And for the first time, I'm going to go backwards one slide. So there's this. 94% of people know how to ride a bike versus this. You decide which resonates with you more. I'm pretty sure I know. And then there's this. So now, if we're talking about bike risk, okay, you look at this picture, there's a story there. You don't know what the story is, right? I haven't told you the story, but I guarantee you're looking at that. 94% of people know how to ride a bike, but only half ride a bike because why? Why do only half of the people that know how to ride a bike actually ride a bike? Go ahead and put it in the chat. This might be the last chat one, so make it good, please. I'm sure it's going to be good, of course, right? And we've only got about 8 minutes to go here. 2 out of shape. It's unpleasant way to die. Wrecks, lazy, hazard avoidance. They have to. Cars are bigger, faster. Risk, trauma. Level of risk, scared, fear of traffic cars, afraid of an accident, too dangerous. Cars and bikes don't mix. They're afraid of getting hurt. Drivers are distracted, laziness, don't own one. Safety concerns, don't own bikes. Bad road design, all great reasons. Car drivers don't respect cyclists. Risk management, the bike is broken. Sure, all of those absolutely possible. Tires are flat. Yeah, I've had that problem too, Mark. Yeah, it's fear. Right? Fear of being hurt. I've been hit. My son's been hit. I did live, as you can imagine. My son did as well. In the valley here, we have a saying, if you ride long enough, it's not a case of if you'll be hit, it's a case of when. Right? So it is this fear. So this image here engages us. We know there's a story, but we don't know what the story is. Okay? All right. So this other thing on being a good presenter, and I'm willing to bet a bunch of you recognize this oldie, right? And I'm sure some of you know it. So I'm in New York City. I'm walking down the sidewalk, and this guy asked me, excuse me, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? Who knows the punchline? Do you know it? Go ahead if you do. Yay, Neil, very good. Practice, practice, practice. Yes, sure, of course. So practice this. I did this multiple times, as I hope you can imagine. I think it went well. I practiced it to myself. Practice it out loud. Time yourself. Practice it to your kids, to your friends, to your significant others. Practice it to Fluffy and Spot if you have no one else. Do it to your pets, whatever. Practice, practice, practice. And I'll give you a teaser here. There is a very interesting word that describes this technique of repeating something multiple times. 3 is often done, but it doesn't have to be. That actually is the name of the term for this grammatical technique of repetition for emphasis. I'll give you a hint. It begins with the letter E, and that's the hint so that you'll know if you found it. You can look for it. You can email me after. Maybe we'll get it posted somehow. It's just a nice teaser and sort of little bit of a sidebar thing to give your mind a little bit of a rest there. Last 2 slides. So this is an offer to you. Tell me a story and I'll listen. Absolutely. Love stories. Love great stories. What are the most important things in a story? You've got to have a plot. Okay, a story arc, right? There's got to be characters, okay, good characters, okay, and the what's at stake, okay? Those 3 things, there's more, there's tons more, but those 3 things will take you a long ways there, okay? And we got 5 minutes, and so I'm going to, at this point, turn it over for any additional questions that you might have, please. Oh, Neil wanted to know my email. So it's firstname.lastname@asu.edu, but the easier one to remember, I guarantee you'll remember it, bald.
The conference has been unmuted. The conference has been muted. The conference has been unmuted.
Emergency.
Yeah, there was some sort of interference there.
So we have unmuted everybody, just so you all know, and then we had to take care of some background noise. We've now muted. Brent, sorry we muted you. And so we're opening the line back up now. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask Jonathan.
This is Michelle David. I'm checking to see if you know if we can use surveys during our presentations at AIHC because they're really appealing.
That's really more of an Alla and Catherine question than mine.
As long as you email it out to students or provide them a link, you can surveys.
Okay, thanks.
And I posted my email.
This is Ala. Is your question about using a poll similar to what we have done? We do not have necessarily software set up. So the tool that Jonathan showed today was specifically for webinars. But you can engage the audience in so many different meaningful ways. During the presentation, you can ask a question and have folks raise their hands. You can have folks work in pairs. So there are many other ways to do similar exercises in the classroom.
And there are, to Ala's point, there are different readily available web-based polls, but it's gonna require coordination as well as everyone using smartphones. So I really like Ala's, get people to raise their hands and do other things along those lines.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is Steve Graham. I had a question relating to those of us who are on committees that actually select presentations. Is there any advice to us on what we might look for in the present AIHA I guess, the submissions that would help us possibly select better presentations that aren't full of overuse of visuals?
Right.
So we have evaluations going out at the end of each day, and that's definitely something that you should put in the evaluation if you go to a session and you see that, because the conference program committee will use that feedback for each session to make decisions for future conferences. And I'd also like to add that we're actually having a session this year in the Hub on Wednesday of conference. I believe it's at 10 a.m. to 10:30 and maybe 9 to 9:30, but there's a hub schedule, and I will post this on the Catalyst community in our website. There's going to be a session Wednesday morning in the Hub. That's how to submit a presentation for conference and get accepted, and the conference program committee members will be there, and they can take your questions, and they can also share feedback of what they look for in presentations, and I think anything that you have to add about what you've seen specifically at the conference in Philly would be very helpful to them.
Yeah, where I'm coming from is as a member of a committee that selects possible PDCs and other technical presentations, does the current submission actually give us an idea of what we're being presented here? So we're not selecting topics or presentations that might be real duds.
Yeah, Ala, you have a very good idea about, encouraging through the call for proposals, submitters,
Gotcha.
tell about the interactivity. So I definitely would say the question that we currently have in the call for proposals, the call for next year, by the way, will go, as always it does, at AIHC. So there is a question there that is asked about the interactivity side of things and making presentation. So I'd say the committee who picks programs needs to pay attention to how that question is asked and answered.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any others? I think we might have met everyone's needs. Appreciate the comments that people are saying, and thank you all very, very much. I'm happy to share resources. We'll be doing so with AIHA and communicate with anyone directly who wishes. And I hope you had a wonderful time, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ala, Catherine, and Erin to wrap it up for us. But I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It was an awesome presentation. As I mentioned earlier in the call, we have recorded this, and we're going to be posting the recording on Catalyst and also on our website under the Speak tab on the AIHC website. And I would also like to plug Jonathan's session. He's doing a session for us similar to this presentation at conference in Philly. It's going to be Monday, May 21st from 3:15 to 4:15, and the abbreviation for that session is D6. We'll also be posting this online. We'll post a link to the session. The recording will be posted, and we'll also post a link to that hub session that's going to be with the conference program committee. Again, I would just like to remind you that we have set up the Catalyst community for you all to swap tips and tricks for your presentation, share your slides. Also, let us know what you thought of the webinar today, and keep the conversation going. If you heard something that intrigued you, just keep everything going and utilize that. That's the space for you guys to really beef up your presentations and make everything great and get everybody excited. Thanks again for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.